What if the Fantastic Four were based on real people and Marvel made a graphic novel about it? Welcome to Read Your Comics. My name is Daryl, and today I am looking at an unusual book from Marvel in the early 2000s, Unstable Molecules. This came at a time of Marvel kind of experimenting. Joe Quesada was the editor-in-chief, and to his credit, he really tried to think outside the box and bring in some indie creators to do some work at Marvel, and really kind of gave them carte blanche to try different things. They tried doing this under a banner called Startling Stories, and they didn't put out a whole lot. There was like the megalomaniacal Spider-Man came out for that. A couple of other one-shots with like The Thing, and I believe the Banner series that Brian Azzarello and Richard Corbin did. But even those were pretty much playing with the characters as they were established within the universe. But this one was solicited as an unearthed true story of the Fantastic Four. That there were four people that lived near New York that Stan and Jack met and loosely based the Fantastic Four characters off of. And that is literally how they solicited the book back in the day. But much like the Sentry and the story behind that character, it was all a fabrication, a fiction within a fiction. But man, do they go hard to sell it within these pages. So I have to admit, at the time, it was a little disappointing to be told this story and be skeptical of it even then, only for them to back out and say, okay, that it wasn't really based off real people. But it does make for an interesting story. They got James Sturm to come in. I don't know if he came to Marvel with the pitch or they went to him and asked him if he wanted to do something, and this is kind of the idea he came up with. But really what he wanted to do was just tell a very human story of life in the 1950s and take an opportunity to kind of explore some of the social norms and constraints of characters that would be archetypes for the superheroes that we all know and love. Throughout the series, it explores themes such as just 1950s repression of gender roles, masculinity, the toxic expectation of masculinity, art versus science, and even the title, Unstable Molecules, which of course comes from the material used to make the Fantastic Four clothing, is a metaphor for people in general. It's a solid series, and it even won an Eisner Award. So despite the little fib about the origins of the story, it's a very well crafted comic that uses the Fantastic Four to kind of lure you into a completely different tale. And Sturm uses some pretty interesting narrative devices to tell the story. So let's go ahead and jump in to the first issue. I do like the cover. It sets that human tale, but brings in these Kirby headshots from the very first page of Fantastic Four #1. It even says the true story of comics' greatest foursome. I like the simple text for the Fantastic Four up here. So Unstable Molecules is definitely the selling point of the title, and not using like the Fantastic Four banner as the selling point. Even the number 1 of 4 written out with a small picture of the comic characters. Very well designed, thoughtful graphic design. The art is mostly by Guy Davis, doing the main narrative part with R. Sikoriek. I hope I said his name correctly. Assisting with some kind of comic scenes that are in the middle here, which we'll get to. But actually, before I jump into the story, I'm going to jump to the back real quick because James Sturm is selling his concept here that this is based off of real people. He tells the story right here of how he was visiting some relatives, found some pictures of a Sue Sturm and Johnny Sturm, who were brothers, and he mentions how, oh, that's like the Fantastic Four, and they laughed like they knew that these people were real, and that's who the Fantastic Four were based off of, almost like, haha, that's common knowledge. And even though he says, I wasn't really related to these people, but my family members were proud of our family name being used for something, blah, 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 blah. Really sells it right here, right? And even has like reference articles as to where this information is coming from. So they're going all in, almost like an Alan Moore book. Think like the 1963 comics where they made fake letter pages and stuff and referenced issues that didn't exist and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's full blown. We are going all in on. I don't want to call it a hoax because where I think the Century in a way was a hoax by saying that was a Stan Lee creation that got left in a drawer. This wasn't really so much a hoax. I think it was just kind of the metatextual concept to tell a different story. But every issue is going to have something like this in the back to further drive it home. And I could definitely see this getting lost over time and people picking this up at like a used bookstore or something and thinking like, "Oh wow, this is real," without, the later material acknowledging, "No, this didn't really happen. This is all it's all fiction in itself." But back to the front, we meet our Reed Richards, and he is named Richard, like Reed Richards, and he's a professor at Columbia University working on something that is essentially unstable molecules. He's trying to understand like how these molecules work in a chaotic form. And in this particular issue, we're mostly going to get narration directly from Reed. And he is going to symbolize the archetype of an emotionally detached genius. We meet Sue asleep on the couch as Johnny appears to be sneaking in late, and he picks up this comic that was on the floor, these Vapor Girl comics. And we'll notice that Sue has Peyton Place that she has fallen asleep reading. See Johnny in his room, and this is the other artist steps in for these Vapor Girl scenes, and it's pretty clear what Johnny is doing in the bed, looking at Vapor Girl as he zooms in and focuses on particular aspects of this character. And they play up this Vapor Girl like she was a real character with a real comic as well. Because in the back it says, you know, Vapor Girl Archivist. And I think that was probably the giveaway for most people, like when this came out, because real comic historians would have been like, what is this Vapor Girl book? Never heard of this. Then we meet Ben, and he has like a girlfriend, and she's wanting to celebrate their first month. So we're definitely getting a setup of Ben kind of goes through girlfriends here. He's found kind of like a sweet one that's maybe like a little overly attached, and he feels awkward about it, but he definitely likes the companionship of a woman. And zoom out to where he's living in the city. So Sue and Johnny living in like a suburb, Reed living in his lab, more or less, even though this is probably his house, and Ben living in the city. So as we continue on to establish Reed as just lost in his work to the point where he has a group of students from the university that are supposed to come in and kind of take a peek at what he's working on, and he's lost in thought. He doesn't even remember them coming in, but he's like, "Have you forgotten it?" He's like, no, of course not. But it's clear that he has, and he kind of explains the unstable molecules thing that he's working on here. One of the students says that his work has been questioned, and this Dr. Mitchell is like, "Oh, you're out of line." But he says no, and then goes on to explain that he used to have an assistant named Victor Dune. So clearly a nod to Dr. Doom right there, who apparently they had some falling out in their research together. So it's implied like they're both kind of working on the same thing, but Reed's kind of moving along without him and leaving Dune in the past. This must be like the chair of his department or something. And he's saying, "Oh, I'm looking forward to the cocktail party tonight," which, of course, again, Reed has forgotten. He's so lost in his work that he didn't remember the students coming. He doesn't remember that he's supposed to be hosting a cocktail party. He calls home where his fiance, it's not even, they don't even say it's his fiance here. It's just like his girlfriend. She picks up the phone. I like this setup. It's very mid-century modern with a little table with the one phone in the house and a chair to sit by the phone. It's a nice attention to the aesthetic of the time in which this is set. Great cartooning right here of the emotion in Sue just standing by the phone, kind of exasperated that he's dropping this on her last minute. She didn't know about it. And you don't hear what Reed is saying, you just see Sue giving in. And as she gives in, she wilts into the chair, and even to the point where her head is down. until Reed gets off the phone and she slams the phone down. She's frustrated because she has other stuff planned for the day, and Reed is dropping a cocktail party on her that she's completely unprepared for. But she agrees to do it and then, leaves the phone unattended. So frustrated, she goes up to wake up her brother who's been orphaned. She's an adult. The parents are obviously gone, and Sue's been left in charge of her teenage brother and getting him up and getting him to school, where he meets one of his friends waiting for him outside, whose name is Rich. And as they walk down the street, kind of establishing them as kind of nerds and outcasts of the school, even though Johnny's, kind of a good-looking kid, I guess. He's got his like nerdy friend, and they're over here like discussing the Vapor Girl comics and stuff, and spying on a girl in the neighborhood, and I guess trying to get up the nerve to like talk to her in a way, but not like hiding behind the car and just watching her leave for school. We cut back to Ben, and we find out Ben's occupation is he's a boxing trainer. And I like his physique in here. You can tell that he was probably like a boxer or a brawler himself, but maybe a little past his prime, maybe slightly overweight even. But he's in here trying to get these boxers in shape. We're going to assume it's either his gym or this is like a promoter. It's not 100% clear if he owns the gym or just works at the gym or what. But he's a little, unkept. Kind of, he's wearing sweats, hair's kind of ruffled, and they're discussing with this guy getting a fighter ready to go in the ring against another contender. Back to Reed, catching him in the bathroom, and we see a government agent saying that he has to come and visit the president immediately. So now, Reed, lost in his work, can't remember students coming in, has Sue working on this cocktail party he's supposed to attend later, and now he's being whisked away to Washington, D.C. out of the blue, not even like a day's like heads up. So here's kind of a Johnny fascinated with cars scene. There's a car still for sale, and it's still there. Been there for a while. Then you get the neighborhood bullies rolling up. This is like Grease or something. They're coming in there. Thunderbird, calling them queers as they drive off. So there's some of your 1950s bullying being established of Johnny and his friend. Now, Johnny's pretty loyal to his friend here because, like I said, he could probably go off with these guys. Back to Reed, who's meeting this general. I guess he doesn't meet with the president directly, but they're basically talking about the work he's doing and how it's going to benefit the military. They talk about the space race and how they have to essentially draft the smartest minds to lead the way in science. Funny when America used to do that kind of stuff. So here's Ben. Once again, they're grounding him and making him the most blue collar, down to earth character. Just having him walking through the city, eating a hot dog, passing homeless people, and so forth. And then goes into I guess, a strip club or something. Johnny and his buddy checking out comics at a local diner, and then they get bullied and harassed some more by these kids. Johnny doesn't really take it though. They leave, and Johnny puts their car in neutral and lets it back up into a lamppost. So now you're going to have these guys really coming after Johnny. So even though Johnny's being bullied, and he may not stand up to these guys like right to their face in the moment, but he's definitely willing to like go out and do something to take a stand against them. And here's the selling point of this is a real thing. Notice this cover taking a turn as we put aliens on the cover, but we also have this, but we do have the Ben Day dots to imply that this is kind of a crossover with the comics that Johnny's looking at. Notice we have Sue is the one character singled out in this little cutout on the cover. And she's there as well, and separated from the other four members down here. So there's not a 100% linear storytelling in this, and you don't really pick up on that until the second issue here. Whereas the first issue, we got most of the perspective coming from Reed, and it was probably about half of the day. We're going to do a little time shifting back to Sue, as this one is called Disappearing Acts. to imply the nature of her feeling invisible. And it's going to be juxtaposed with this vapor girl throughout. So Sue waking up, and you get a lot more narration from Sue than you did from Reed. Reed's narration was very sparse, but Sue's narration is practically every panel something going on. So here she is again, getting the phone call about the dinner party, and you see the zap of the brain to vapor girl, and that's like a tension that Sue is having, this feeling trapped and being controlled. So we see after the stress of Reed dropping this on her, sending Johnny off to school, and she mentions less than an hour into the day for the headache to arrive. I need a cigarette and a cup of coffee. And we see her outside smoking a cigarette while she's reading her book. And we meet a nosy neighbor over here who's very judgmental of Sue's life choices, apparently, even though Sue is in a relationship with a, well-respected man. She's not married, and she's up here having to be the mother to her teenage brother. This lady comes up and immediately is like, "Are you smoking?" And you see her inner thoughts of how incredibly observant. And then, but politely, "I know it's terrible. I need to quit soon." And as this lady points out how, like, somebody, a classmate of hers when she was in high school, is now married and having children and stuff. And, Sue's just politely taking it, like, "No, ma'am. Yes, amazing." They're just being polite to her as she sits there and kind of trashes Sue to her face. So as this lady's berating Sue, the coffee cake she was making for this book club or women's group to come over starts to burn. And once again, good cartooning of facial expressions and emotions. Even these ladies, as they come through the door, you can tell their attitudes immediately. And it's explained here that this women's group was actually Sue's mom's women's group. And when she passed away, Sue took her place. So there's a dichotomy here between Sue, who's probably in her early 20s, versus these ladies who are probably in their 40s, and their perceptions on, polite society and how ladies are supposed to act and so forth. But Sue, trying to keep some balance in her life, doing everything she can to hold on to it, has invited some younger women in the neighborhood to join. And one of the younger women had picked the book Peyton Place. Now, I've never read Peyton Place. I don't know a lot about it. I inferred a lot from this, but then I looked it up. And it's a book that was published in 1956 and exposes the hypocrisy of small town America, marital dissatisfaction, sexual secrets, and more double standards of 1950s life. So you see the resistance of the older women here who even refused to read it, or one of them refused to read it. Another one started to read it but felt like it was smut, it was scandalous. Whereas the younger women are acknowledging it. I relate to this. This is the life we live right now, and it's kind of ridiculous. And they just want to have a discussion about it and be open about it. But these older women, very resistant. They don't want to, change. They don't want to see change in what is the status quo for their lives. And the older women are just very harsh about it. I mean, this scene in particular, I mean, it's a hard truth where the older women are kind of taking up for one of the men in the book, and the younger woman was like, he was forcing himself on her, with the other woman interjecting, trying to still take up for the man, and she just takes it down. She just loses it. Like, what do you know about this? What do any of you know about this? And Sue's inner dialogue, it's clear Kay does know something about this. And you see the smugness on these older ladies. The phone rings and somebody else answers the phone, which I kind of find hilarious. I keep wanting to say Strum instead of Sturm. Just if I mispronounce it at some point, you'll know why. I have a hard time keeping it straight. Of course, this older woman who is her mom's friend is the one to answer the phone, and it's Johnny being picked up by the police for crashing that car. And here's this juxtaposition with the Vapor Girl story. So the boy being abducted by aliens or like the police, I guess, and then running off and getting lost in the woods. And that's kind of how Sue is feeling about Johnny, that no matter what she says, as Vapor Girl, who's kind of like a disembodied mind at this point is trying to tell the boy, don't go down there. Everybody gets lost going down this route. And the boy can't hear her. Again, it's playing on that being invisible, not being heard kind of role for women here. So Sue's going to go pick him up at the police department. And she's so annoyed with him, of course. And Johnny pushing back, like, you're not my mother. But she's having to fill this role at an age she wasn't prepared to take on. I mean, she's old enough to have probably had a baby and be raising a baby from a toddler age, but to just be thrust onto a teenager, that's a different story, especially when you aren't the mother, you are the sister. So first she takes him to try to visit Reed. She wants to talk to Reed, probably to say, like, there's too much going on. This cocktail party is going to be so hard to deal with. Reed's not there, and she sees this Dr. Mitchell, and she mentions how Dr. Mitchell's pretty creepy. He leers at her, makes her feel uncomfortable. Just being a woman in the 1950s, she just has to tolerate it, continue being polite, and move along. The tension's mounting for the boy as, like, the thing, the thing, King Grumore, is rising and hovering, but this also being a metaphor for the next person she takes him to, who is Ben at the gym. And Johnny likes Ben. Johnny is drawn to Ben's, like, blue collar masculinity. Now, they don't play up Ben as being, like, overly gruff. He's friendly, like the fun uncle, right? Him and Sue obviously have a kinship with each other. Like, he's comforting. Ben is the grounded character in this that is more emotionally there for Sue and Johnny than Reed is. You even see Johnny wanting to look at Ben's pinup calendar of girls, like, oh, that's not for you, covers it up with his hand. And there's definitely some flirtiness going on here between the two. And the dialogue mentions how Ben and Reed were friends, that they were college roommates, all the stuff that's in the Fantastic Four that we know of. You do often wonder, like, why was Reed Richards friends with Ben Grimm, the kind of jock in college? And they play into that here as well. And as they're just having, like, a friendly moment, but Sue has her arm. The girlfriend that we saw in the first issue, who's wanting to celebrate the 1 month anniversary, comes in and is immediately feeling a little jealous of Sue. Ben trying to explain that, like, oh, this is my buddy from college. It's his girlfriend, and they're having a party tonight. But I said we're already celebrating our anniversary. And she's like, oh, I like parties. Like, they want to go, and he's already kind of figuring, like, he wants to get out of this relationship with her, I think. Because the look on his face every time is kind of like, all right, I think I've gotten in too much with this girl. And then you have this police officer going into this forbidden land that the boy went into as well. Sue's telling him that he's grounded. He says he hates you, and just more and more the pressure of Sue's life is just coming down on her. She's got so much going on, trying to just be the perfect little homemaker, like a housewife, even though they're not even married. It's almost like she's trying to prove herself worthy to have this life. And she's at the grocery store and apparently meets maybe like an old high school boyfriend or something who's turned into a beatnik now. And he speaks in rhyme, and as if he's some kind of street poet or Jack Kerouac. And that makes Sue realize, though, like, oh, well, maybe my life could have taken a really wrong turn if I hadn't gone this route. So giving her a little bit of comfort. So every moment here, she's trying to get in touch with Reed. She has no idea that Reed has been whisked away to Washington. And we don't even really revisit Reed in this issue. And as Sue prepares for the cocktail party, taking 2 more aspirin, just constant headaches, she sees the old lady neighbor and the other lady from her women's group kind of having a laugh out there. And she feels like they're probably talking about the young girl. And it irritates Sue. She's going to take up for the girl that's her age and saying that these ladies they don't understand, or they've forgotten what it's like. And then Sue prepares for the party as she lays out the cocktail stuff and just waits. She still hasn't heard from Reed. And while she lays there, she lays her head down to take a nap, probably because she's got constant migraines. Says, I don't like my life and I want it to change. So this is kind of depressing, really, in a lot of ways. I remember reading it for the first time thinking, like, They're wanting to sell you on this idea that the characters we know and love were based off of real people, that they would probably somehow be heroes themselves, but really they're all just extremely flawed individuals. So here's more of the selling point stuff, pretending that it's like correspondence with people who had insight onto these real people. This is the Vapor Girl comic. You're really trying to sell that as a thing. It'd have been neat if they'd put out a Vapor Girl comic, actually, and just do the issue that they're going through in here with this character and everything. That would have been kind of fun. All right, let's look at number 3, the Johnny issue. I love the color on this cover. It's probably my favorite cover of the 4. You've got the flames behind Johnny and the shadows with the hints of purple over here. I really dig the design of all of the covers, really, but I think this one of Johnny is probably my favorite. And this one, we get to start out with some Fantastic Four panels. Roman Candle. So this one's going to focus on Johnny, but it's not really telling the story from Johnny's perspective. It's We're going to see it from his friend's perspective. And in here he's describing how he knew the person that Johnny Storm was based off of in the comics, and almost selling it in here too. That like, hey, there's somebody that grew up that kind of knew all this stuff. So not a full-time shift here. We're kind of picking up at this dinner party time because Sue's in her black dress. The friend is coming over to see Johnny again. And Sue's like, yo, he can't come out tonight. You guys just got picked up from the police. You know that. And you see him idolizing her as Vapor Girl and how he perceives her. And we get this shot of the kid, and we kind of understand who he's going to be. And in here, he explains how he comes from a broken home as well. He lives just with his mom. They've moved around a few times. Mom often has different boyfriends. Uh, he's especially feeling outcast as kind of like the short, nerdy kid. But Johnny, that could very easily fit in with the popular kids, picked him as a friend. And that's the only thing that he has like an attachment to this world for. But his description here of being an outcast by the world is very reminiscent of the Mole Man in Fantastic Four #1, describing why he kind of went to the underground. Pretty heavy stuff here too, with the boy essentially describing suicide. Like, what if he killed himself, and how he wants people to react. He wants his mother to be upset. He wants everyone to be upset that they feel like they pushed him to it. His father, who he doesn't know, being sad. But at the same time, he's like, but if I did that, it's like I wouldn't know if they were doing that or not. So where's the pleasure in making them miserable by doing that to myself if I don't get to witness it at the same time? And he talks about how everything's based on revenge in these early comics and stuff. So he's just going to sit there and make his own food. We don't see his mom. She must be at work. And he's eating it straight out of the pot. He's probably making like some mac and cheese, eating it straight out of the pot. And Johnny shows up and they go on their little walkabout around town. And they're talking about comics and just, how dull living in this suburb. I guess it's a suburb of New York, Glen Cove. I don't know where that is, but they mention it several times that it's this dead end town, that the people that grow up there just stay there. They have no prospects really, and how awful it really is. But this kid who's moved around a couple times, he does feel a little bit secure in Glen Cove only because he's found Johnny. And they're going to go to this dance studio to, I guess, leer at some women. And here come the bullies to chase him down an alley. I mean, this feels like Stand By Me when the kids are being chased by the older teens. They get away and Johnny steals their car, and it's already bashed up from before. This taking this for a night out on the town, and they run into some beatniks themselves who are saying that we're going to go to this party on the beach. Do you know how to get? We don't know how to get there though. Can you show us? And they're like, sure, just follow us. And the nerdy kid's almost feeling a little hesitant about the whole thing because he's worried that his friend is going to find new friends and leave him behind. And they find a bonfire out by the beach, and it's just a bunch of beatniks out there. They're drinking, probably smoking pot, uh, just having a time. Like, probably teens to 20 somethings out partying, having a good time. And you see Johnny disappears. The boy's kind of getting lost in the trance of the fire and the beatniks dancing around, and he loses Johnny, starts stumbling around looking for him, crosses, people making out and stuff. And he finds Johnny on the beach with the guy that was with Sue before. So he must have known Johnny from when he, I guess, was with Sue, probably, in their teen years or something. And remember Johnny as a little boy. And he's still speaking to him like he's a poet, right? But trying to lure Johnny to this life of the beatnik, being a free spirit, a runaway. And as he's leaning in to give Johnny some some beatnik wisdom, the friend rolls up. And it's kind of like, where'd you go? You left me behind. Johnny is transfixed by this guy, and he kind of wants to do he kind of wants to do it. He wants to go be a beatnik and just kind of run off, run away, quit school, and get away from Glen Cove. And the boy, his friend, realizes it. He says, "I was too late. That man did something to him." Johnny's eyes were glazed over, his movements slow. I tried to read his mind, but our psychic connection seemed severed. Johnny, let's go. And it was funny as I was reading this again, I was like, this guy thinks he's Jack Kerouac or something. And sure enough, that's what he's reading by the fire and quoting it. And there's your scene from the cover with Johnny and the fire behind him. And the fire is inside him, but it's a desire to get away from this life that they feel trapped in. And in this moment, he just knows he's lost his friend. And this is what he wants to do on the beach. He's having his own like little comic book flashback. He wants to have revenge, much like the villains of the characters in the comics. But he knows he's unable to. So as Johnny goes off to take a leak, the bullies show up and jump them both and beat them all up. And here we've got more stuff. This is supposed to be the real life beatnik guy, and this is supposed to be the friend, and that he was able to have an interview with him about all this, and that's what a lot of this narration came from, was the interview with him about Johnny. So I'm telling you, man, they really tried to sell this as the real deal. So our final issue, we have Ben, and he appears like kind of bloodied, maybe laying on the ground and unconscious. You got him looking pretty horrendous right there as him and Reed are having kind of a face off. You got him looking pretty down and out with the maniacal Reed laughing at him. So a lot of subtext going on the cover here. Many time shift going back to that, probably the same part with Johnny in the last issue, just before the cocktail party is about to begin. And the girlfriend is having a tantrum over the anniversary dinner she had planned. Now, the narration is not Ben. We've gone back to Reed in this. So it's notable throughout the series, we get Sue's narration, Reed's narration. We don't really get Johnny's direct narration. We get his point of view from a friend, and we don't get Ben at all. Ben has no narration throughout the whole series. Ben leaves and he goes to have a drink, meets up with the guy we saw from the gym earlier, and who's, kind of calling Ben a louse, but like joking about it in a way, and pointing out how he goes through girlfriends all the time. He always finds something wrong with them to run them off. And he's like, "What about that blonde that came to see earlier?" And he pulls out a picture and he's like, "Oh, Sue, yeah, she's perfect, but she's my buddy's girl. Like, I would never do anything, try to move in on her because Reed is like my best friend." And we got like a picture of them together there. And Ben's just kind of getting like grumpier and grumpier. Probably thinking like he does want to be with Sue, but she's taken and like probably going through the idea that like he's comparing every woman to Sue. And he tries to move in on this lady here. And she says she's with someone. And he gets cranky about it. I like these establishing shots that shows he's in the thick of the city. He's not in the little Glen Cove suburb. So now the cocktail party is in full swing, and we see Sue has little bubbles on the top of her head, implying that she's a little tipsy. She's got a buzz. And we see one of the students from the very first issue that was questioning Reed about his work with the other scientist, Dr. Dune. And I guess her buzz is she's kind of flirting with him. When the doorbell rings and it's her friend from the women's club earlier. And she's like so happy that she's there because she's in a room full of stuffy scientists and doesn't really have anything to talk to him about and doesn't really want to do it. She was just doing this for Reed. And she's like, please come over, bring your husband. And her husband happens to be a cartoonist. And he is the cartoonist of the Vapor Girl comic. And she's like, great, Johnny will love that. Bring them all. Bring them and their friends. She's like, well, they can be kind of rowdy. She's like, nope, bring them all over. Bring over all of your cartoonist friends. So Suze goes back inside, and here's that Dr. Mitchell that, we established earlier that she felt uncomfortable around him because he was always leering at her. So, I mean, check out this panel here. Definitely continuing that motif, right? And as he even like touches her and stuff. Just then Ben comes in, and you think Ben is coming in kind of to rescue her, but really Sue's already taken care of it between these two panels. He's got kind of a scratch on his face because as Ben and Sue greet each other, he's like, "Hey, what happened to your eye, Doc? Doing some boxing?" And Ben knows him too. He's like, "I slept through your class all through college, if you remember." And Sue's just happy that people that she actually likes are showing up to the party. Kay returns, and who does she bring with her? Stan, Jack, Art, and Harvey. Essentially, the Marvel bullpen. And that is how they're going to meet the people that they would base the Fantastic Four off of at this wild cocktail party. I guess this is supposed to be Kirby right here. I don't know which one's really supposed to be Stan. Maybe this one? I don't know. It's not really drawn like Stan would have looked back then. But, if you know anything about the real Marvel bullpen, Stan and Jack, they weren't exactly friends. So I don't know that they would have gone to a party together like this that wasn't somehow truly work related. So it already loses the credibility of this being a real story at that point. But I think the narrative of the whole thing is a good solid story in itself. If you are like any bit of a comic historian, that part of the story kind of falls apart a little bit. At least if it's being sold as the truth. If you go into it, I think it's better to go into knowing that it's all fictionalized than it is how Marvel originally promoted it, that it was a true story. Because already the Vapor Girl stuff would have tipped you off, and now seeing this Stan and Jack at a party together, like just showing up at a late night party, no, that wouldn't have happened. You got Ben talking to him over here. I guess this is supposed to be Stan and this is supposed to be Jack. It's like, cartoonist, huh? How about me? Touchdown Grimm, Gridiron Star. And you got I guess the character that's Kirby say, sports comics don't sell. Monster comics are selling. I'll be a monster. Just ask my ex. Put me in your funny books. And the party keeps like escalating and building as all of these people that we've met throughout the series start showing up. Here comes the next door neighbor to complain about people parked in her driveway. And this guy who already has a buzz as well is like, well, come on in. We'll find out who's blocking your driveway. You want a drink while you're at it? And she's like, well, maybe just a little nip for the nerves. So the old lady showing her true colors as well there too. She just wanted to come to the party is what it was. She wanted to be invited. And then you have some comical scenes of the scientist talking to, I guess this is the guy that's supposed to be the artist of the Vapor Girl comic. And he's talking about like the science stuff he's doing. He's like, what do you do? He's like, I letter comic books. Or maybe it's already Simic. It's kind of funny, but yeah, this is the guy that's Stan. So who are the other guys? I don't know who this one's supposed to be. This one's supposed to be Kirby, I think. This is supposed to be Stan. It doesn't even look like Stan, even then. Sue's going upstairs to get Johnny to say, hey, like the artist that draws the Vapor Girl comic you like is here. And Johnny is gone. He's run off to, be at that beatnik party. We get back to Reed for the first time since the very first issue. And he's going through the motions of like asking Sue to marry him. And he's coming up with these like really long-winded ways to do it. Sue, I believe it would be mutually beneficial for us to enter into okay. It is apparent that our lives have intersected to the point that the next logical step, and you have the cabbie, you proposing, yes? Yes, yes, that is my intention. And you love her? Of course. Then you say, I love you. Marry me. Just simple, straight to the point. That's all you need to say. But being the hyper intellectual, he has to have this like really wordy way to say it, right? Unfortunately, Sue, who's drunk, feeling really down on her life, she's at this party for her boyfriend who's not even attending the party. Her brother has run off. Just things are going so terrible. And here comes Ben. He's trying to console her, and they both have a buzz, and one thing leads to another. Right as Reed is showing up, and he goes looking for Sue, only to find her with Ben, and they're undressing even. So things were going pretty far, right? And again, that was kind of like a depressing part of this when you first read it, and you are supposed to believe that it's really the true people that inspired the Fantastic Four, and you're like, well, gosh, they were ultra dysfunctional. I thought we were going to get this story of these like amazing like people, like a scientist and his family essentially. And no, you get this like completely kind of depressing tale of 1950s society and social structures, which in itself is a good narrative. It works for the Fantastic Four, but when you're initially believing that this is the real Fantastic Four, the real people that they based it off of, you're like, oh, how does this make me look at these characters now? So Sue is really just mad. Like, where have you been this whole time? You know, she doesn't say she's sorry for what she's doing, and Reed says some pretty awful things to her too. Emotions flare. Ben is actually sorry though. Ben is the one that's like, no, no, wait, I was drunk and I'm really sorry. Like, you're my best friend. I didn't mean to do this to you. And it just goes off the chain when Johnny shows up with the beatnik. So this party is really just, blowing up into a big scene. And you've got these cartoonists there who just, they haven't been in it the whole time other than the wife connection, other than one of them, the fictional cartoonist, his wife being connected to Sue and brought them over. So they're just here to witness this. And I like the color here too. The color palette's been solid throughout, but the way it changes, how it gets brighter and then goes dim, like really dim, as a fight breaks out. And Ben gets hit in the back of the head with a bottle, and I guess that's where we see our cover image, but everything just going white. And as they come in with, they're going to check on Ben. See, this one looks more like Stan to me than what the other guy looked like. And they're going to roll Ben over. Johnny's just there to collect some stuff, and he's leaving his friend behind. And because the friend's like, Johnny, stay. And you got the old lady yelling, Peyton Place, Peyton Place. I warned you about Peyton Place. And Sue's just saying, Johnny, wait. And he says, I love you. And he says, I love you too, sis. So you've kind of got a little moment there where Johnny's kind of found his piece and what he wants to do. And he doesn't want to completely leave Sue without at least mending that fence to some degree. And then you have Reed having some kind of epiphany over to the side as well. And we return to color, and he's going to hop in the car with the beatniks as they head back towards the city. I guess Reed doesn't have a car. He must not drive. He was taking a cab earlier, and now he's hopping a ride with the beatniks to head back to the lab. And you see the one guy saying, Stan, Jack, you can come out now. They're all gone. Like, I guess they were hiding behind the couches. There's your mole man kid laying out on the couch where they got beat up. It's been a long day. So Sue kind of being consoled by her friend that is her age. The epilogue is tying up all the metatextual information of Reed and his unstable molecules and the tenuous relationships between humans and how they interact with each other and how things can collide and then fall apart just as quickly. But as lost as he's getting in his work, he's saying, I trusted you, leaning towards Sue, but he damaged his relationship himself by not being there and letting it kind of fall apart like that. He's saying, I trusted you, really saying it to Sue and to Ben, but to some sense, perhaps realizing it's also himself. He trusted himself, and it kind of all fell apart. So this one is some letter that supposedly was written to Sturm about this party, that his father used to work on the Vapor Girl comic, but he passed away, and he used to tell this story about this wild party and blah, blah, blah. Again, just another piece of information that's building up the whole background of the story. So that's it. Unstable Molecules, the real, true story of the Fantastic Four, all fiction. A solid story if you're looking for something different, particularly from Marvel. And again, I commended Marvel for trying stuff like this. I don't think it had the commercial success that Quesada really wanted out of it. It did win awards. It got an Eisner, lots of critical acclaim. I don't think it's still in print, but there is a trade paperback out there floating around. So that's it for this one. Until next time, read your comics.